Let's talk about Gaza for a moment. You are Jewish. Sure. You're an outspoken critic of Israel, of Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you believe that what Israel is doing in Gaza right now is a genocide? But I made it very clear, Dave, to people that I didn't agree with Harris's Gaza policy and that she would be bad on Gaza. You went into Trump.
I was very clear.
No, you suggested Trump would be more anti-war, didn't you? Or am I wrong on that?
What Israel's doing to Gaza is too evil, and America supporting it is so obviously, not only is it not in our interest, it's so clearly against our national interest. Like, why would we want to continue drumming up hatred in this part of the world? And do we really think we can get away with supporting this without drumming up hatred and having to deal with the consequences of that?
What's going on, everybody? Dave Smith just stepped into Zeteo, Mehdi Hasan's no-nonsense platform, and what followed was nothing short of political detonation. This isn't just some friendly debate, it's a full-on reckoning. A Jewish libertarian, former Trump voter, and one of the sharpest voices on the right is now publicly calling for Trump's impeachment and doing it on Mehdi's turf. Why? Because Trump has gone full neocon. In just 8 months of his second term, he's helped Israel break a ceasefire in Gaza, bomb Yemen, and launch unconstitutional strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, all while pretending to be an anti-war president. Dave Smith isn't buying it. He's not sugarcoating anything, as you'll see. He calls out the shame threats about Iran's nuke. He tortures the war crimes in Gaza, and he's gonna slam the hypocrisy of a man who campaigns as a patriot while selling out American interests to foreign lobbies. This is Zeteo at its boldest. Mehdi Hasan's holding the space, Dave Smith lighting it on fire. Let's jump in.
You also said on Twitter that if this conflict is truly over, quote, then we flirted with disaster for absolutely no reason. But Trump may have avoided a disaster right now in terms of, like, we've ended it for now. I don't know, as at the time of taping this conversation, but it could change at any moment. But big picture, a lot of experts are saying, and common sense tells us, hasn't this just incentivized an Iranian nuclear weapons program that didn't actually exist, per Tulsi Gabbard, but now may exist? Because if you were the Iranians, wouldn't you want one right now, having just been attacked?
Well, we've certainly, if the goal of U.S. foreign policy for the last 30 years was we need to push Iran to develop nuclear weapons, we really couldn't have gone about it any better. Now, you know, I don't like nuclear weapons in general. I don't want to see any more countries get them, but obviously, you know, the dynamic with nuclear weapons is that they come with the ultimate risk. But in the meantime, they can deter a war. And there's a reason why we have not gone to war with North Korea. And we have gone to war with all of these countries in the Middle East who didn't have nuclear weapons. And even, you know, obviously the Gaddafi, the Libya model that the Israeli government can't stop screaming about, you know, is the worst of all of these situations. And so, you know, the truth to me is that I think if we look at what just happened with this war, and I do, look, while I'll bash Donald Trump, I called for his impeachment over launching it, I will also give him credit that he took the off-ramp that the Iranians gave to him, which is like the biggest takeaway to me of this whole thing. It totally destroys the foundational claim that the neoconservatives have been making all these years, which is essentially that. And I think one that is reliant on some anti-Muslim bigotry in there is that the world could stand Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong having nuclear weapons. The world can stand, you know, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin having nuclear. But these mullahs in Iran, if they get a nuclear weapon, they just don't care about their own survival. They're all a bunch of suicide bombers. And so they'll use it, and they don't care whether, if they know that that guarantees their own destruction. That's not what I'm seeing out of any of these conflicts. What I'm seeing is an Iranian government who clearly does not want to fight with the United States of America and does not want their own destruction, as most ruling regimes would rather rule than be destroyed.
He's not just okay with Putin and Kim having nuclear weapons. He loves Putin and Kim. In fact, those are his words. He said, I exchanged love letters with nuclear-armed Kim Jong-un. We've been agreeing a lot for the past 10 minutes, Dave, so let me push back a bit. You said that, you know, I'll give him credit for the off-ramp. But this is the Donald Trump way of doing things. He creates a problem, then offers a solution to it and says, praise me for the solution to the problem I created. I mean, he bombed Iran. The fact that he took an off-ramp from bombing Iran doesn't change the fact that he took the on-ramp to bomb Iran, which something George Bush didn't do, Barack Obama didn't do, Joe Biden didn't do.
Well, that is a fair point. And look, it's you know, it's kind of like if you get you know, if you're blackout drunk and you get in your car to go cruise around on the highway and people are saying, hey, this is a really bad idea. When you come home in one piece, that doesn't disprove that it was a really bad idea to do this. But maybe, look, I mean, the way I tend to do it, right, I think my view is that every U.S. president in my lifetime is a war criminal who should be, you know, locked in jail for the rest of their life. I think that, like, say what Barack Obama did in escalating the war in Afghanistan, of launching the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, and of pouring in all the drone campaigns, I think is horrible. That being said, I still give him credit for the JCPOA.
Yes.
I think that was a good move.
Agreed.
And I still give him credit for opening up relations with Cuba. I mean, you know, so like I try to say, well, okay, this part I agreed with, this part I thought was horribly wrong. So yes, you're absolutely right. Donald Trump, this is what he does all the time. He walks you up to the cliff and then walks back and then wants credit for walking back from the cliff. So
Indeed.
I agree with you.
You've been pretty outspoken against Trump in recent days over Iran. As you say, you've called for his impeachment. But you voted for him as recently as, what, 8 months ago? When was the election? November 2024. Why did you make that decision, and do you now regret it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I said the other day that I apologized for voting for him. But, you know, with a lot of these things, I just felt like he's making the worst possible decision right now. I'm going to criticize him in the harshest possible language and try to send as much of a message as I can that even people who did support Donald Trump will turn on him over this. And I was glad to see that many other people who supported Donald Trump also had similar messages. But I think that my calculation is, I've talked about this like extensively on my podcast, but my calculation of supporting Donald Trump, I think is kind of maybe the inverse or somewhat similar to your calculation in voting for Joe Biden or then Kamala Harris. It's like you would agree that they were funding a genocide for the last year plus of their administration. It's just the overall calculation. You think that, well, I think probably one of these two people are going to be president and this one will be preferable to the other one. So this has always been my biggest concern about Donald Trump, though, was some type of war with Iran. So whether I regret the vote, I tend to think like, that was in the past. But at the time, I thought it was the best decision.
Okay.
Looking back at it, who knows?
Putting aside the regrets, I think you said you already apologized for it, so in a sense you are regretful. Let's just talk about the calculation you had, because I'm fascinated by Trump voters, and most Trump voters I meet are not as informed as yourself, I think it's fair to say. You're pretty well informed on the foreign policy agenda. We know that Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. You knew that. We know he assassinated top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. You knew that. Those two decisions are basically why we are where we are now. It's why Iran started enriching at 60%, not the 3.67% they were doing under Barack Obama's JCPOA deal. You went ahead and voted for Donald Trump last year, knowing that he is the guy who tore up the Iran deal. It's not like, this is not 2016. You didn't go in saying, well, maybe Donald Trump might be the guy. He's saying anti-war stuff in Michigan. He's attacking Liz Cheney. Yeah, he sounds like the more anti-war guy. He had a record that you, Dave Smith, were aware of, killing Soleimani, tearing up the nuclear deal. So when he goes and becomes president and strikes Iran, that is on your hands too, right? You should have known that he was going to do that.
Well, I don't really agree with that any more than I think that if Kamala Harris had won and continued the policy, which she certainly would have, of funding Israel's destruction of Gaza, I don't think you would have had blood on your hands necessarily. The truth is that we live in a system where there are two major parties.
But I made it very clear, Dave, to people that I didn't agree with Harris's Gaza policy and that she would be bad on Gaza. You went into Trump.
I was very clear.
No, you suggested Trump would be more anti-war, didn't you? Or am I wrong on that?
No. I mean, I said I always said going in, and I always was very clear on criticizing Trump for leaving the JCPOA and taking out Soleimani. I thought was a horrible decision that could have led to a catastrophe if not for Iranian restraint. But no, I was very clear on that, and I was very clear that the biggest concern with Donald Trump was Iran. I said from the very beginning that was the thing that was going to make me turn on him if he went in that direction. And also, I always knew it was inevitable that Donald Trump would mess up and that I would turn on him and be criticizing him. I wish he hadn't. I will say this. I held out a sliver of hope, and I always portrayed it this way, that because Netanyahu had double-crossed Donald Trump after he gave him everything he wanted in his first term, that maybe Trump would be petty and vindictive enough to not want to give him everything he wanted in his second term. And maybe the fact that there were voices like Tulsi and some of these other people who were a little bit better, maybe we'd see something better. But I always knew that he was going to end up disappointing.
Let's talk about Gaza for a moment. You are Jewish. Sure. You're an outspoken critic of Israel, of Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you believe that what Israel is doing in Gaza right now is a genocide?
Yeah, probably. I think, you know, in terms of international law, the definition of genocide is incredibly vague. You know, the like trying to destroy an ethnicity or nationality in part or whole or something like that. Yeah. And for the most part, when I do debates on this subject, I've never really liked to use the word genocide because I just feel like it derails the debate into a debate about semantics.
How would you describe what Israel is doing in Gaza? What words would you use?
Just the horrific and intentional destruction of a people, with the clear aims of the clear aims of ethnic cleansing and annexing land that doesn't justly belong to you. But just inflicting the worst level of human suffering on children by choice, when you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
So whatever you want to call that, the worst thing in the world is what Israel is doing to Gaza.
Do you believe, and you spend a lot of time in right-wing circles more than I do you believe attitudes on the right towards Israel are changing? Young Republicans, according to some polls, seem to be much less gung-ho and blindly pro-Israeli than older Republicans.
Yeah, I think not only is it changing, but changing in a profoundly rapid, amount of time. And I think that there's the major reason for this, I think, is kind of the same on the left and the right, which is that the Zionists, as you know, because you've worked in these areas more than I have, but in terms of like corporate media and the old legacy media, you just can't overstate the amount of control that there is in that environment where very, very few voices can ever dissent. And as you know, because you've done so many of these debates and you're one of the best at kind of breaking the framing, the whole pro-Israel argument always relies on framing tactics. It's always how you frame. And if you present this to the American people, as they always do, with, doesn't Israel have a right to defend itself? Does it, you know what I mean? And then that's the question. It just, but now the whole media and information decentralization that we've seen over the last few years has now allowed it that the critics of Israel have a fighting shot to have their voice heard too. And I think the result from that is that just a lot of people aren't buying the propaganda anymore. It's almost just too ridiculous. What Israel's doing to Gaza is too evil, and America supporting it is so obviously, not only is it not in our interest, it's so clearly against our national interests. Like, why would we want to continue drumming up hatred in this part of the world? And do we really think we can get away with supporting this without drumming up hatred and having to deal with the consequences of that? So I think that pretty much explains why people are turning against this.
Let's be real. Dave Smith didn't just criticize Trump. He eviscerated the entire foundation of MAGA foreign policy with nothing but facts, logic, and spin. He's right. There was no imminent threat from Iran. There was no justification. There was no constitutional justification for bombing sovereign nations. And there sure as hell is no moral excuse for backing a genocide campaign against Palestinian children just to keep Netanyahu smiling. This isn't America first. This is the empire first, lobby first, war profiters first. And Dave's not afraid to say what most Republicans are too afraid and cowardly to whisper. Trump's playing both sides of the war racket, and it's time his base wakes the hell up. You can't claim to be anti-establishment while cheerleading war crimes. You can't shout freedom while blowing past the Constitution. And you definitely can't cry about fake news while repeating the same Pentagon fear porn. Dave Smith brought receipts, the heat, and the guts. And if that pisses off Trump's cult, maybe they need a mirror, not a microphone. So ask yourself, if this Trump voter is calling it treasonous, what the hell are the rest of us waiting for? Don't just watch from the sidelines. Like, share, and subscribe before the next illegal strikes drop, or before Trump tries to convince you it was for freedom and liberty again.